If you told me this is how my life would tilt at 72, I would have laughed and offered you more coffee. But this is a story about the quiet kinds of betrayals, the ones that happen at the dinner table, with folded napkins and polite smiles. Hi, my name is Margaret Maggie Holloway, and I'm 72 years old. I'm writing this because if I don't put it somewhere, it'll rot inside me. And yes, this is a confession, maybe even a warning. I suppose I should say up front that this is chapter 1, even if life doesn't come with neat labels. I didn't know it was the beginning at the time. I thought it was just another Sunday. The day my children decided I was a burden started with rain tapping against the kitchen window like it was hesitant to come inside. I live in the house my husband, Tom, and I bought in 1978. Yellow siding, white trim, the kind of place that smells faintly of lemon cleaner and old books, no matter how often you air it out. Tom's been gone 7 years now. Cancer. Fast and unfair. After he died, the house got quieter, but I stayed. I planted tomatoes. I fixed the loose step myself. I learned how to sleep on only one side of the bed. That morning, I woke up early, the way older bodies do, with my knees aching and my mind already halfway into the day. I made banana bread because Emily likes it, and I still cling to these small rituals like they're proof I matter. Emily is my oldest, 50, efficient, always checking her watch. Then there's Brian, 47, who avoids conflict by pretending he's above it. And my youngest, Sarah, 43, who used to braid my hair when she was little and now barely touches me, unless it's for a quick hug goodbye. They were all coming over for dinner. That alone should have told me something was off. I set the table for 4, then hesitated, and set it for 5 out of habit before quietly removing Tom's old place setting. That little pause happens more often than I'd like to admit. When they arrived, they'd brought wine I couldn't pronounce, and the kind of smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. "Mom," Emily said, kissing my cheek, already glancing around the living room like she was appraising it. "You really should think about downsizing." She hadn't even taken her coat off yet. I laughed it off. Let me at least serve dinner first. The rain got heavier as the afternoon went on. Grey sky, low light. The house felt smaller with all of us in it, like it was holding its breath. Dinner was polite. Too polite. Forks clinked. Someone complimented the chicken. Brian asked about my doctor's appointment last week, and when I said it was fine, just routine, he nodded a little too seriously. Then Emily cleared her throat. That sound. I'll hear it in my sleep until I die. "Mom," she said, folding her napkin with unnecessary precision. "We've been talking." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "All of us," Sarah added quickly, not meeting my eyes. I looked at their faces. 3 adults I carried inside my body at different times. 3 people I taught how to read, how to say please, how to survive heartbreak. And suddenly, I was on the outside of a circle. About what? I asked, though I already knew. Emily took the lead as usual. About you living alone. There it was. The unspoken thing dressed up in concern. "I managed just fine," I said. "I drove myself to the appointment. I fixed the sink last month. That's not the point." Brian cut in gently, which somehow hurt more. It's a lot, Mom. For us." I blinked. "For you." Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were shiny. "You call a lot," she said softly. "And when something goes wrong, it's always us. We have our own families, our own lives." The room felt suddenly too warm. I could feel my pulse in my ears. "I don't mean to be a bother," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. "I just thought, that's what family does." Emily exhaled, clearly frustrated. "See, that's exactly it. You expect things. And we're stretched thin already. Kids, jobs, mortgages. Sometimes it feels like you're another responsibility. Another responsibility. Not a mother. Not a widow. Not a woman who gave up her career to raise them. A responsibility. A burden, Brian said quietly, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. The word landed between us and didn't move. I stared at my plate. The chicken had gone cold. I noticed a crack in the glaze I'd never seen before. No one spoke for a moment. Even the rain seemed to pause. I didn't know you felt that way, I said finally. Emily softened her tone, the way she does when she wants something. We're not saying we don't love you. We're just saying, maybe it's time to consider assisted living, or selling the house, using the money to make things easier. For who? I wondered. Me or them? Sarah reached for my hand. I let her take it, though it felt like pity, not comfort. I don't want to go to a home, I said. This is my home. Well, Emily replied, it's going to be someone's eventually. That was when something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted, like a key turning. They stayed another half hour. We talked about nothing. Weather, traffic, Emily's new countertops. When they finally left, I stood in the doorway and waved until their taillights disappeared down the wet street. Then I closed the door. The silence rushed in. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest like I was a child again. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, breathing, replaying every word. A burden. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through the house instead. I touched the walls, the picture frames, the dent in the hallway where Brian once crashed his bike inside. Sarah's height marks on the laundry door. Emily's old room, now a guest room, still faintly smelling of lavender. I went into the study where Tom's desk still sat, untouched. In the bottom drawer was my will. We'd written it together years ago. Simple. Everything to the kids. Split evenly. The house, the savings, the little bit of jewelry that actually meant something. I sat down in his chair. It creaked under my weight, familiar and comforting. Well, I said out loud to no one, if I'm such a burden. My hands didn't shake as much as I expected when I pulled the papers out. I didn't know yet what I was going to change. Only that something had to. Because if they thought I was already gone, then maybe it was time I showed them what absence really looked like. I stayed up until dawn with a pen in my hand and a lifetime spread out in front of me. And that was only the beginning. I didn't tell anyone about the will. Not that night. Not the next morning when the sun came up too bright and too cheerful, like it was mocking me. I folded the papers back into their envelope and slid them into Tom's desk drawer again, but they didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing did. I made myself toast and forgot to eat it. I stood at the sink watching steam fog the window and kept hearing Emily's voice in my head, calm and reasonable and devastatingly firm. Another responsibility. As if I were a broken appliance they hadn't had time to replace yet. The funny thing is, grief doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just hums quietly in the background while you go about your day pretending you're fine. The first person I noticed treating me differently was Sarah. She used to call every other day, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to vent about work or the kids. After that dinner, the calls slowed, once a week, then once every 10 days. When I did hear from her, her voice had that distracted edge, like she was always in the middle of something more important. "Mom, can I call you back?" became a familiar refrain. She rarely did. Brian was harder to read. He sent texts instead of calling, short ones. "How are you feeling? Everything okay?" I learned quickly that those questions weren't invitations. They were boxes to be checked. When I replied with anything longer than fine, he'd take hours, sometimes days, to respond. Emily, on the other hand, leaned in. Not emotionally, practically. She started stopping by unannounced, usually with a brisk knock and a tight smile. "I was in the neighborhood," she'd say, glancing at her watch. "Just wanted to check in." She'd walk through the house like an inspector, comment on the clutter, the stairs, the rugs. "These could be a tripping hazard," she said once. nudging the corner of a rug with her shoe. "I've had that rug for 20 years, I replied. "Yes, and you've been 72 for 6 months, she shot back like that settled it. She brought pamphlets, assisted living communities with smiling grey-haired couples playing pickleball, financial planning brochures. One afternoon, she even brought a realtor's card and left it on the counter, just in case. Each visit left me feeling smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. How often my name came up in hushed conversations when I walked into a room. How my children spoke about me instead of to me when we were all together. At Sarah's house one afternoon, I walked in from the backyard where I'd been playing with her youngest and caught the tail end of a sentence. "If Mom moves in with you, I don't see how that's fair," Emily was saying. Sarah startled when she saw me. "Mom, we didn't hear you." "No," I said, smiling tightly. "I imagine you didn't." Emily cleared her throat. "We were just talking logistics." I nodded. "Of course you were. Logistics." Like I was a couch they needed to figure out how to fit. That night, back home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same spot where they told me I was a burden. I realized something then, something that stung worse than the words themselves. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what would happen to them if I got old inconveniently. That realization was oddly clarifying. I started doing things differently, small things at first. I stopped calling unless it was necessary. I stopped offering to babysit. I stopped sending reminders about birthdays and anniversaries. The silence stretched, and instead of panicking, I felt lighter. I began to take long walks in the morning. The neighborhood was full of people who waved and smiled and didn't see me as a problem to be solved. I joined a local book club at the library. I started volunteering twice a week at the community garden, my hands in the dirt, the sun on my face. There was a woman there named Ruth, 68, sharp-tongued, kind eyes. "You look like someone who's been underestimated," she said to me one morning, handing me a pair of gloves. I laughed, surprised. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to those of us who survived it," she replied. "We became friends. Real friends. The kind who listen without checking their phones. The kind who don't sigh when you talk about your aches and pains. Through Ruth, I met others. Widows. Divorcees. People with complicated families and complicated histories. People who didn't flinch when I said I was lonely. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Meanwhile, Emily escalated. She called one afternoon, voice clipped. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances." "I have them handled," I said calmly. "Well, I don't think you do," she replied. "You're not getting any younger." There it was again. That subtle stripping away of autonomy. "I'm still capable of making my own decisions," I said. There was a pause. Then she sighed. "See, this is what I mean. You're being difficult. Difficult. Not scared. Not hurt. Not adjusting. Difficult." After that call, I went into the study and opened the drawer again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I made an appointment with a lawyer. A young man with kind eyes and no preconceived notions about what a woman my age should or shouldn't do. He listened, really listened. Didn't interrupt when my voice wavered. Didn't assume reconciliation was my goal. "You're allowed to decide what your legacy looks like," he said simply. I walked out of his office feeling taller. Over the next few weeks, I made choices, deliberate ones. I set up a small trust for my grandchildren, education only, tightly controlled. I made provisions for Ruth and for the community garden. I arranged for the house to be sold upon my death, with the proceeds funding a local women's shelter Tom and I had quietly supported for years. And my children. They were still included, but not in the way they expected. I didn't do it out of spite, at least not entirely. I did it because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Love isn't measured by blood alone. The day I signed the final documents, my hand was steady. That evening, Emily called. "We've been talking," she said, her tone overly bright. "About next steps. You know, planning for the future." I looked around my kitchen. The rain had stopped. The house felt warm. "I already have," I replied. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Because they thought the story was about what I was losing. They had no idea what I was about to take back. It began, oddly enough, with a birthday card. My 73rd. No phone call that morning. No surprise visit. Just a card slipped through the mail slot sometime after noon, the envelope thin, the handwriting unmistakably Emily's. I stood there in the entryway for a long moment, staring at my own name written so neatly it almost looked printed. I didn't open it right away. I made tea instead, let it steep too long, sat at the table, and listened to the house creak the way old houses do, like they're thinking about speaking but decide against it. When I finally slid a finger under the flap, a crisp gift card fell out. Grocery store, $50. Inside, Emily had written, "Hope you're doing well. Let us know if you need anything." No love, no mention of dinner, no plans, just charity. I laughed, out loud, a short, sharp sound that surprised me. Then I folded the card back up and slid it into the junk drawer with old batteries and rubber bands. It felt appropriate. That was the moment I realized something else had changed too. They weren't just distant anymore. They were nervous. Emily started calling again, but not the way she used to. Her questions circled. How was I feeling? Had I seen my doctor lately? Was I managing the stairs okay? Had I thought any more about simplifying things? Brian texted more often. Long messages this time. Stories about work. Complaints about his back. Little attempts at connection that felt rehearsed. Sarah was the most obvious. She invited me over for dinner twice in 1 month, something she hadn't done in over a year. Hugged me longer than usual. Asked if I was happy. Happy. Such a loaded word. I smiled and told them all the same thing. I'm fine. Which was true. Just not in the way they assumed. The truth began to leak out through other channels. Emily's son, Jake, called me one afternoon, 16. Awkward. Sweet. The kind of kid who still says please without being reminded. "Grandma," he said, voice hesitant. "Mom's kind of stressed. She keeps saying stuff about paperwork, and that you're being secretive." There it was. I closed my eyes. Not in pain, just tired. "I'm not being secretive," I said gently. "I'm being private." "Oh," he replied. "Okay." After we hung up, I sat very still. Emily was worried. Not about me, but about control, about certainty, about making sure the future looked the way she expected. I'd spent most of my life smoothing things over for my children, absorbing discomfort so they didn't have to, swallowing words to keep the peace. I was done swallowing. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Emily showed up one Saturday morning without calling first. I was in the garden, knees aching, hands in the dirt, when I heard the back door open. "Mom?" she called, already irritated. "Why was your lawyer's office listed on that mail you left out?" I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. The air smelled like soil and basil. Calm, grounded. "You went through my mail?" I asked. She waved a hand. It was right there. "And don't change the subject." I looked at her then. Really looked. The tight jaw, the defensive posture, the fear dressed up as authority. "I hired a lawyer," I said. "Yes." Her eyes sharpened. "For what?" "For my affairs." Her voice rose despite herself. "Why didn't you tell us?" I tilted my head. "You didn't ask." "That's not fair." I let out a slow breath. Neither was calling me a burden at my own table. She froze. I didn't say. "Brian did," I interrupted. And you didn't stop him. The garden was quiet except for birdsong and the faint hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. Emily crossed her arms. So this is revenge. I considered that. Truly. Then shook my head. No, I said. This is clarity. Her mouth opened. Closed. Did you change your will? There it was. No pretense now. Yes. Her face flushed. Mom, that's not something you do without discussing it with your family. I smiled sadly. Funny. You discussed my future without me just fine. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. Are we still in it? She asked finally. Yes, I said. Just not the way you assumed. She left shortly after. No hug. No goodbye. Just the slam of the back door and the sound of her car pulling away too fast. That evening, Brian called. Emily had told him. He tried a different approach. Softer, regretful. Mom, he said, if we hurt you, I'm sorry. That wasn't the intention. I know, I replied. And I meant it. But intention doesn't erase impact. There was a long silence. Then quietly, are you punishing us? I looked around my living room. At Tom's chair. At the photos on the mantel. At the life I had built. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. He didn't argue after that. Sarah cried when she found out. Real tears. Apologies. Promises to do better. I held her and let her cry, but I didn't take anything back. Because this wasn't about teaching them a lesson. It was about finally teaching myself one. The final twist, the part none of them saw coming, was that the changes didn't make me bitter. They made me free. I slept better, laughed more. I stopped waiting for calls and started living my days. Trips with Ruth, late lunches, long conversations that didn't feel like obligations. And somewhere along the way, my children realized something too. They had mistaken my patience for permanence, and now they were learning what it felt like to stand on uncertain ground. The truth is, the reckoning didn't come with shouting or slammed doors or some dramatic courtroom scene. It came quietly, slowly, the way real consequences usually do. It started with a medical scare. Nothing life-threatening, at least not in hindsight. Chest pain in the middle of the night, sharp enough to steal my breath. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, one hand pressed to my sternum, the other gripping the mattress, and for just a moment, I wondered if this was it. If Tom was about to be right on time, waiting somewhere I couldn't see. I didn't call Emily. I didn't call Brian. I called Ruth. She was at my door in 15 minutes, hair a mess, shoes mismatched, already scolding me for not waking her sooner. She drove me to the hospital, held my hand while they ran tests, argued with a nurse when they tried to discharge me too quickly. It turned out to be severe acid reflux, aggravated by stress. Embarrassing almost, but lying there under fluorescent lights, listening to Ruth breathe beside me in the chair, I understood something with startling clarity. Family is who shows up at 2 a.m. The kids found out the next day. Sarah cried again, over the phone this time, her voice thick with guilt. Why didn't you call me? I didn't want to be a burden, I said gently. The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. Emily reacted differently. She came over that evening, tight-lipped and pale, sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch like she was afraid to settle in. This is serious, Mom, she said. Things like this are exactly why we've been worried. I nodded. I know. You can't be alone, she pressed. What if Ruth hadn't answered? I looked at her, really looked, at the fear finally stripped of its armor. You didn't answer last time I called you crying, I said quietly. Do you remember that? She flinched. I was in a meeting. I know, I said. I understood. I always understand. That was the first time she cried. Not neat tears. Not polite ones. The kind that wrinkle your face and leave you gasping. I didn't mean it like that, she whispered. I didn't think you heard us. I heard everything, I replied. I just stopped pretending I didn't. After that, things shifted, not back to the way they were, but into something new and fragile and honest. Brian came by more often, not with solutions, just with coffee. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and admitted, quietly, I didn't know how to be your son once you didn't need me. Sarah started calling again, not out of obligation but curiosity, asking about my days, listening to the answers. Emily struggled the most. Control is a hard thing to let go of once you've mistaken it for love. The real showdown came 3 months later. I invited them all over. Same kitchen, same table, different energy. They arrived tense, unsure, bracing themselves. I asked you here because I want to be clear, I said once we were seated. There will be no surprises. I told them everything about the trust, the shelter, the garden, the conditions, the reasons. No accusations, no dramatics, just facts. Emily stared at the table, jaw tight. Brian nodded slowly. Sarah reached for my hand again, this time without pity. So, that's it? Emily asked. That's how you see us now? I thought about that for a long moment. No, I said. That's how I see myself. They left that night quieter than they arrived. In the months that followed, something unexpected happened. They adjusted. Not perfectly, not all at once, but they adjusted. They stopped talking about my life like it was a problem to be managed. They asked before offering advice. They listened when I said no. And I learned to stop overgiving, to stop shrinking, to stop mistaking endurance for love. The house is still mine. So is my time. I still see my children. We laugh. We argue. We are slowly becoming something more honest than we ever were before. And if I die tomorrow, my legacy won't be guilt or obligation. It will be choice. So if you're reading this and you're older and tired and feeling like you're taking up too much space, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You don't owe anyone your quiet disappearance. You are allowed to take up the room you paid for with your life. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't punishment. It's survival with dignity intact.